who do multiple things throughout to make these events happen. And especially in this time of COVID, have been working real hard to try to keep people engaged. So we wanted to recognize them here and thank all of them and all the past presidents for all that they do. Also wanted to remind everybody that if you want to get more engaged and not miss any of the events that we have, you can text Smyrna to 63975 and you will get text updates on all the events we have coming up, networking events and other things that are going on. So it's a great way to stay in touch with the Smyrna Business Association. Also on our website, that is a great resource for doing business in Smyrna. We have a COVID-19 resources page. So there's some great content on that. There's also, you can find out about upcoming events and how to become a member of the Smyrna Business Association. So.
That is awesome. Thank you very much, Paul, for those updates. And now we will have a Smyrna community update by Kevin Moore, City Engineer.
All right. Thanks, sir. I'm going to read over a few of these. Smyrna Library is celebrating Hispanic Heritage Month with a lecture about Day of the Dead. The speaker is KSU Professor Audrey Garcia, and she'll be speaking this Sunday, October the 4th at 3. She'll discuss the culturally diverse origin of the Mexican tradition and the relevant role that food, particularly sweets and bread, plays into it. To sign up for that webinar, all you need to do is visit the Smyrna Library events calendar at smyrna-library.com. From our friends over at Keep Smyrna Beautiful, they are selling bags of jonquil bulbs. The bulbs are $20 per bag for $50. Residents can purchase their bulbs at the Smyrna Recycling Center while supplies last. For more information, call 770-431-2863. They're also announcing a Shred Fest for 2020. That's going to be Saturday, October 10th from 9 a.m. until noon. Smyrna residents are invited to bring documents to be shredded by A1 Shredding. The event will take place at the Church Street Park Wolf Adult Rec Center located at 884 Church Street. A limit of 5 boxes per vehicle. They ask that people remove all binders, both binder clip. And again, this event is sponsored by Keep Smyrna Beautiful. And finally, they wanted to make sure you guys know that the Smyrna Recycling Center is beginning next week. The center is going to be open regular hours on Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday from 8 until 4 and until 6. From the Parks and Recs Division, they'll be hosting a Drive or Treat Halloween event on Friday, October 16th, until 9 p.m. at the Smyrna Center. This event is the place of the annual Fall Carnival. They're going to have various characters lined up around the traffic circle in front of the community center. Decorate their cars, dress in costume, and drive around the circle to see all their favorite characters. Participants will stay in their vehicles the entire time, and they'll have a goodie bag station set up around the circle. Parks and Rec, they're looking for items for the goodie bags, candy, trinkets, etc., anything that a child from 5 to 12 may like. And they're also looking for volunteers to help stuff the bags and set up the event. Jody Mills is the coordinator at Parks and Rec for this event, and said if any of you guys have any want to participate or provide any items for the event, her email address is jmills, JMILLS, at smyrna.gov, and you can go to her at 681-5450. And finally, the mayor and council, they've authorized the creation of a small business nonprofit CARES grant program to assist locally owned and operated small businesses and nonprofits who've experienced business interruption due to COVID-19. Qualifying businesses and nonprofit organizations must demonstrate the financial impact of $500 or greater to receive grant. Each business requesting to participate in this program must complete the application. The application started today, submit it by email or delivery to the city of Smyrna by 5 p.m. on October 30th, 2020. All applications submitted by the day required will be answered. And they've asked you guys to find more information on the Facebook page or on the city's website, smyrna.gov. And that's all I have for today.
Awesome. Kevin, thank you very much. We definitely appreciate all that you do. And now I'm going to share my screen again so that we can talk a little bit about our sponsors. And this is a list of all of our sponsors for the Smyrna Business Association. And it's because of our members and sponsors that we're able to invest back into our community and provide scholarships to deserving students every year. So this is the list. If you're looking for some great businesses in the area to work with, these sponsors are more than happy to work for you. And one of the perks of being a sponsor is you have the ability during the program to do a couple of minutes to talk a bit about your services. And today, our sponsor is Paul Powers. So Paul Powers, you now have the floor to talk a little bit about Powers Electric.
Great. Hello, everybody. Paul Powers with Powers Electric. We are a local Smyrna business, and we do residential and commercial electrical service repair. Question I get a lot is, did you change your name when you opened your business to Powers? I did not. I was born Paul Powers, and it just kind of worked out that way that I got into the electrical trade. But we do residential service and commercial service. We don't do construction. So if you need new lighting in your kitchen or something's not working correctly, you want to update your panel, something along those lines, or if you have a small business or a restaurant, anything like that, we can come in. We have emergency services where, let's say the dishwasher goes down in the middle of dinner and it's an electrical problem. We can come in, get that fixed up for you, get you back up and running so you can keep operating. So these are just some of the things that we do. If you'd like to check us out, we just crossed our 300 5-star review threshold on Google. So that was a goal that we set for ourselves for the year. And the guys got it done September 30th. So they got it done before October. So that makes me a happy owner. And we're going to keep rolling on those. So Paul Powers, Powers Electric, where the service is shockingly good.
Thank you very much, Paul, for your support. And now, before we get to our keynote speaker today, we're going to do a little bit of trivia. And we've got some door prizes for that as well. And I know, Paul, you just finished being Paul Powers Electric Man. Now you're going to be a game show host. So we got one question that we're going to ask. And if you could open up your chat box at the bottom of your screen, there's a chat box there. And the first person to respond with the correct answer will tell them what they win, Paul.
$25 Amazon gift card. So.
All right. And that's going to be courtesy of Powers Electric.
Okay, so since we've got Braves playoffs, we're going to do Braves trivia here, Braves postseason trivia. Which player on the Braves in the 90s participated in 4 World Series but only has 1 World Series ring?
Oh.
It's not Chipper. It's not Smoltz. Oh, Ian got it. Tom Glavine.
All right.
Nice work, Ian. He's about to go shopping. All right, awesome. Well, thank you very much, Paul, for that. And now I am going to, while I get ready to go and do a little talk up for Teresa Schieffer, I am going to make her a co-host so that she has the ability, after we do this, to share her screen as well. So now she has those capabilities to do that, so that after I go through this, she can take over and share her screen for some exciting information. So Teresa Schieffer, she is the Senior Assistant District Attorney with Cobb County District Attorney's Office, where she's been a felony prosecutor since 2013. Teresa is currently assigned as the Cobb County Prosecutor to the Georgia Sexual Assault Kit Initiative. It's a federally funded task force created to coordinate community response to cold case sexual assaults and sexually motivated homicides. In this role, Teresa investigates and prosecutes these cases in Cobb County and collaborates with other state and county agencies regarding best practices and policy development for handling these difficult cases. In her more than 14 years as a prosecutor, Teresa has served as a trainer for the Prosecuting Attorneys Council of Georgia and the Criminal Justice Coordinating Council on various topics throughout Georgia. Teresa is a member of the Georgia Sexual Assault Response Team State Expert Committee and also serves as a trainer for that project. Teresa is active in her Cobb County community, serving on the Smyrna Advisory Council of the Cobb Chamber of Commerce and a board member of the Smyrna Public Safety Foundation. She was a member of the Leadership Cobb Class of 2017 and remains active in the Leadership Council Alumni Association. Without further ado, I would like to give the floor to Teresa Schieffer.
Hi, everybody. Thank you, Nick, for that very comprehensive bio. And thank you all for having me today. This is quite an honor to be presenting. It's obviously a little bit awkward in this type of arena to be doing this. We're all kind of trying to figure out how to stay engaged while we're doing this Zoom. So I actually have you all on my screen in front of me so I can actually seem like I'm talking to people. I did a presentation a couple of weeks ago that was a pre-recorded presentation that was really difficult when you have a joke or something and there's nobody there responding back to you. It felt very awkward. I was going to have my babysitter down here just so that I had someone to engage back with me because it's very strange. So bear with us. Again, I thank you for having me today. I know that I have probably about 25, 30 minutes to talk. So I do want to explain to you a little bit about this project that we have going here in Cobb County. It's a really great project that we've been working on for a couple of years. And every time I get the opportunity to go out and talk about it, I certainly take that opportunity because I think it's really great for Cobb County citizens to know the things that we're working on for y'all. So kind of what I'm gonna do, thank you, Nick, for allowing me to do the share screen. I'm gonna do a little bit of a PowerPoint at the beginning just to kind of tell you about the project that we're working on and kind of how it came to be. That part is going to be brief, and then I'm going to talk to you about a couple cool new cases that we've been working on because I know that's really what everybody loves to hear about is, all the forensic files, all of the ID shows. That's what I get to do every day, which is really cool. So I'll talk to you about that a little bit. But first, I'm going to try and do a share screen here, so just bear with me to share my screen. Let's do this PowerPoint and let's see if this works. Okay, looks like it should be working. Kevin, I see your face. Will you give me a thumbs up if you can see that screen?
It works.
Okay, perfect, thank you. Because I still just see myself, so okay, thank you. Okay, so as Nick mentioned, the project that I am working on, this is called the Georgia Sexual Assault Kit Initiative. For short, we're called Georgia SAKI. And basically how this all came to be is back in 2015, some of y'all may recall that there were, the AJC did some investigations about previously unsubmitted sexual assault kits that they found that had been located at Grady Hospital. When they found this, they started to kind of dig a little bit further to find out, is this an issue that's across the state, or is this just an issue that's in Fulton County or just with Grady Hospital? And in doing investigations, they realized that there were thousands of kits throughout the state of Georgia, sexual assault kits that had not been submitted to the GBI for testing. So, you know, everybody thinks, oh, someone who's sexually assaulted, they go and they have what lay people know of as a rape kit completed. And then that rape kit is sent off to the GBI to do testing to see if we can figure out who potentially was the perpetrator. Well, what was happening is that not every kit was actually being submitted. And there were a lot of different reasons why those kits weren't submitted. One of those reasons being, think back in the 90s, the GBI, we didn't have the same capabilities for DNA testing that we have now. So for instance, back in the day, the kits were not being submitted to the GBI because, let's say, they didn't have a sample to compare that to. We didn't have basically a CODIS system like we have today. So essentially in 2015, when they realized that there were thousands of kits that were basically sitting in law enforcement inventory places, hospitals, and at different sexual assault centers, they realized that we needed to pass a law here in Georgia. So what came of that was Senate Bill 304, and that was in 2016 that was passed. And essentially what Senate Bill 304 said then, was that law enforcement would be taking possession of a sexual assault kit within 96 hours of that kit being completed. So for instance, if that kit was completed at Grady Hospital, or if that kit was completed here, we have Live Safe resources where we have sexual assault kits or exams, forensic sexual assault exams being conducted within 96 hours. Those kits are collected by law enforcement, and then law enforcement must submit those kits to the GBI within 30 days of possessing that sexual assault kit. So from here on out, every kit, no matter what, as long as it is a reported kit, so as long as it's the victim wants to proceed with, there's a name, there's a reported kit, then that has to be submitted to the GBI for testing. What it also said was any kit that was in the possession at that time of either law enforcement, hospitals, every single kit had to be submitted then to the GBI by August of 2016 for those kits to be tested. So that was Senate Bill 304. It's now in the official Georgia code at 35-1-2. So let's all think about the ramifications of that. Okay, so we realized that there were thousands of kits that had not been submitted. So now all of a sudden law enforcement has to submit all of these kits. So this was in 2016. So you can imagine the GBI, with all the work that they have to do on cases that are currently pending, then to get an influx of thousands of sexual assault kits that all of a sudden now they have to test as well, that became very overwhelming. So what happened? Well, GBI then contracted with some private labs that are out of the state of Georgia, where they could send those sexual assault kits to those labs to be tested at those labs, and then essentially sent back to Georgia to be able, if there's a DNA profile in any of those kits, then it's sent back to Georgia to upload into the Georgia CODIS system. So that's where we started in 2016. Okay, so now let's say we've got all these kits and we're getting these hits back. Well, that's great. We're starting to have the opportunity to investigate some of these cold cases. Well, let's think about who's going to do the investigation and the prosecution of all of these cases. Our DA's office, we are slammed with cases. And here in Cobb, we are very lucky with the number of prosecutors that we have, with the support that we have of obviously our DA, Joyette Holmes, and our Superior Court bench, to move cases. We are tremendously lucky here in Cobb County. That's not to say that that's how it is throughout the entire state. So the Criminal Justice Coordinating Council reached out to BJA, which is a federal program. And in 2017, BJA gave federal money to the Criminal Justice Coordinating Council, which is a state agency, to create a task force that essentially would go back and investigate and potentially prosecute these new sexual assault hits that we were getting. What we then did was CJCC reached out to Cobb County, to DeKalb County, to Fulton County, and also to the Prosecuting Attorneys Council, which is our statewide prosecuting agency, to say, hey, look, do you all want to partner together on this? What we really needed to think about is when we're looking at these older cases, as we know, serial offenders don't necessarily stop at jurisdiction lines. They don't, they're not in Fulton County committing crimes and then they see, oh, now I'm in Cobb County, so I'm gonna stop committing crimes and I'm gonna go back to Fulton County. We wish they did, but they don't. So what we at that point did was we created this task force. And this task force is Cobb County, DeKalb County, PAC, which is the Prosecuting Attorneys Council, and we have an investigator actually from the Atlanta Police Department as well. And essentially, what we do is we have now created this grant-funded task force where we work our own cases. So for instance, I am the prosecutor for Cobb County cases. We have a prosecutor for the DeKalb County cases. And then we have a statewide prosecutor who helps for the statewide cases. And what we do is we all work on our own cases individually, but we collaborate with each other about essentially any cases that cross jurisdictional lines, as well as cases where, these are cold cases. So we need to work with each other and collaborate about best practices. Not only best practices for investigation and prosecution, but also best practices for victim notification. If we're talking about cases and sexual assault kits, for instance, one case I'll talk to you about, it was from 1998. The victim at the time was 16 years old. She did not know that her kit was not sent to the GBI. Fast forward into 2017 and 2018, when we actually got a hit to an offender in her case, you have to think about how much has changed in her life since 1998. So we had to come up with kind of some protocols and best practices about victim notification, because we can't just show up at somebody's door 20 years later, knock on their door and say, oh, hey, by the way, guess what we just found? So that's what we all work together as this task force to make sure that we kind of come up with the best practices about that. So who we are, I just have a little picture there. I just mentioned to you, we have a DeKalb County prosecutor and investigator. We have a PAC, Prosecuting Attorneys Council, investigator and prosecutor, and basically they help the other jurisdictions throughout the state to work on these cold cases, because a lot of these other district attorneys' offices and judicial circuits don't have the financial ability or capability to have their own prosecutors focusing solely on these cases like we do in DeKalb and Cobb County. And then we have our our coordinator who helps us do that all together. And then we have some people from CJCC, since they are the state agency that provides us the resources. The other great partner we have is with LiveSafe Resources here in Cobb County, that we have victim advocates that are assigned exclusively to this project, because again, our mantra that I'll talk to you about a little bit later is this is victim-centered. This is really something that we have to think about. While we would love to go back and be able to solve these cases and prosecute them, our main goal is really to focus on these victims in these cases. So a really key component, and we thank Live Safe Resources and Tracy and everybody over there that we're able to partner up with them, that we do have a victim advocate assigned exclusively to our project from there. So our mantra of our Georgia Sexual Assault Kit Initiative project is victim-centered, trauma-informed, and offender-focused. Okay, so let's talk just a little bit about by the numbers. So as of July 2020, the total number of kits throughout the state of Georgia that were submitted and tested as these previously unsubmitted kits, there were 3,322 kits. Of those, there were almost 1,300 profiles developed for CODIS, which means of those, let's say 3,300 kits, there were about 1,300 that they were able to get enough of a profile from that sample, that kit, whatever it was, that they were able to get about 1,300 that could be uploaded to our CODIS database. From those 1,300, to date, we have about 508 CODIS hits. Now, what that means is that the person is in our CODIS database, the offender, which means that they are a convicted felon. So that database gets larger every day as we have new people who become convicted felons and have to submit their DNA into the database. Basically, the larger our database gets, the better chance we'll have to start getting hits on some of these other 1,300 cases that we don't have hits yet on. In Cobb County alone, when we started this project, there were approximately 800 kits that we submitted to Cobb County, or to the GBI. So there were 800 kits that were previously unsubmitted, that the victims had no idea that their kits were not submitted. And again, as I stated before, there were a lot of reasons that they weren't submitted. It wasn't necessarily that, you know, law enforcement just didn't want to. There were a lot of different factors that go into that, and I could spend days talking about all of this. From those 800 kits to date, we have about 97 CODIS hits from those 800 kits that we have. So what happens with those 97 cases that now we have those hits on? So as of July of 2020 is kind of where I'm gauging this from, is many of those cases had been previously prosecuted. So that's great. That means that our DA's office, our law enforcement agencies, when these sexual assaults were reported and investigated, that means that those cases were actually tried, or there was a plea, but they were prosecuted. So they were prosecuted without that sexual assault kit. So that's great. Again, that's showing that Cobb County, we were ahead of things. We were aggressively prosecuting and investigating these cases even before we had the ability to do some of that testing. So what essentially those CODIS hits for those cases were doing is I would go back and double check and make sure it was that same defendant that was prosecuted. That was the defendant that matched to that DNA profile that we now received. So essentially, we were confirming that we prosecuted the correct defendant in those cases. Some of the other cases we have to think about statute of limitations. These are really old cases. Some of the kits that were submitted are from the early 90s. So we might have a statute of limitations issue with those that might prevent us from being able to prosecute them. We might have closed some of those cases for other reasons, such as we have a deceased defendant or we have a deceased victim. And I'll just say a caveat, just because we have a deceased victim does not necessarily mean that we can't prosecute the case. It just means it can be much more difficult because of the defendant's constitutional rights, obviously, to confront victims and a lot of our court rules. It makes it much more difficult. But we have prosecuted a case in Cobb County fairly recently that was a deceased victim that we were able to do some other different things to do that. And I'll shout out to Courtney Veal for doing that. She's no longer with the DA's office, but she was amazing in prosecuting that case and obtaining the conviction in that where there was a deceased victim. We do have some cases right now where there are outstanding warrants. So where I received a hit, we conducted an investigation and we asked law enforcement to obtain a warrant for an arrest for rape in those cases. So we have a couple outstanding warrants on some of those cases. We also have indictments from some of those 97 cases that we were working on. And we have some cases that have gone to trial and some that have pled out without going to trial. But so some of those cases are closed that way. So essentially that's what's happening with those 97 hits that we have to date. And then we're also doing some other kind of cool things with some of the hits that we're getting. And that's what I'm going to talk to you a little bit more about now. And I'm looking at my time. And Nick, just let me know, kind of give me a heads up time-wise, then when I need to cut it off, because I'll be happy to take some questions. So, okay, so the new part of this project that is really exciting is our ability to do advanced DNA testing. I'm going to stop sharing the screen. Well, actually, I'll keep sharing just for another minute because I'll go into some of the background of this case. But let's think about in these cases where we might have a sexual assault kit where there is a profile developed, and let's say it's submitted into CODIS and there is no CODIS hit. So that means to us that the person is not in our CODIS database. So, you know, all the investigation, Cobb County Law Enforcement, Smyrna Police Department, everybody has done an investigation on a case, and we kind of get to a point where, okay, we know we have a profile, but we don't have a hit. So what do we do with that? Well, back in the day, there wasn't much we could do with that. What can we do now? Well, y'all, a lot of you have probably heard about the Golden State Killer. So Golden State Killer was somebody who was out in California, that there were all of these outstanding cases, and they have DNA profiles that were linking the cases together, but they just couldn't figure out who the person was. So they reached out to this company called Parabon, Parabon Nanolabs, that was able to do some advanced DNA testing. And ultimately, they were able to narrow down and find the perpetrator, and they were able to arrest him. And he has since pled guilty to many of those cases. So I was following a lot of that. A lot of these conferences that I go to where we talk about DNA testing, we talk about, you know, what's new, what kind of advancements have been made. And I was hearing a lot about this called genetic genealogy testing. And I wanted to learn more about it and see if there were any cases that maybe we could work on with our project, that we could see if we could solve things through this genetic genealogy. And I came back to this case from 1999 that was a case here in Cobb County that involved 3 victims, rape victims, that had reported to the police. Police had done an investigation, their kits had been completed, and essentially the case had just gone cold. What the kits did tell us back then was that all of those cases were linked together. So essentially the kits were tested, they came up with a profile, and they said, look, we know it's the same person that's committing these crimes, but we don't know who that person is. So that's called a forensic match. They forensically matched these cases together, but they couldn't tell us who the person was. So that was when, looking at that, I thought, well, maybe this would be a good case that we could try and do this genetic genealogy for. So again, it's new, it's in its infancy. This was a couple of years ago, and it's very expensive. So what I did at that point is reached out to the Criminal Justice Coordinating Council, so the same state agency that funds our project. And I said, hey, do you think y'all would be willing, or do we have the money that we could do this kind of testing on some of these cases? And so everybody sat down and met together and said, yeah, you know what, this is probably a good use of our money in some of these cases where all other leads are exhausted and where we do know that we have a viable DNA profile to work with. So here we have the Lorenzo Williams case, and I'm gonna talk through it a little bit. I'm actually gonna stop sharing my screen. Let's see if I can stop share. Okay, so let me tell you a little bit about the Lorenzo. Well, now I just said I was gonna stop, but I think I'm gonna go back to sharing it if it'll let me do it, because I do have some. Okay, back to sharing. Okay, sorry everybody. I just didn't want everyone just to read the screen. I wanted people to be able to listen as well. Okay, so the background of this case: during a 6-month period in 1999, there were 3 women in Cobb County, Georgia, in and around actually the Smyrna area, who were sexually assaulted in their homes at night by an unknown perpetrator. So in 1999, each of these victims reported their assault to the police, and they underwent the sexual assault exams. In early 2000, so essentially each of the different law enforcement agencies who were investigating the case, which in this case, it was all Cobb County Police Department, but we do have some others where there's overlap between, say, Cobb County and Marietta, or Cobb County and Smyrna. And back in 1999, there weren't the same systems to be reporting and coordinating with each other about some of these cases. Whereas we have that now, they didn't necessarily have that the same way of the sharing of information and everything back in 1999. In this case, even the investigators within Cobb County Police Department weren't sharing the information necessarily amongst themselves, so they didn't realize that these 3 cases were connected. So each of the cases was kind of in their own investigation. But the key here is that those sexual assault kits were submitted, each of those 3 sexual assault kits, and in early 2000, the GBI reported back and said, hey, look, we don't know who the perpetrator is, but we do know that all 3 of these cases are matched to each other. It's the same perpetrator. So all of that was happened in 1999 and into 2000. At that point, though, the suspect remained unknown. Cobb County continued to investigate and was not able to come up with any sort of a suspect. In around 2015, or between 2013 and 2015, the DA's office, under then District Attorney Vic Reynolds, created a cold case unit within the DA's office to kind of go back through and look at some of these cases. We were able to we received a federal grant to do that. And so while Cobb County Police or Smyrna Police may not have the ability to go back and look at some of these cold cases as frequently as they would like because of manpower issues, we were able to pull some of these cases from Cobb County Police and, again, Smyrna Police, Marietta Police, and start looking at some of these cold cases. So this was one of those cases that was actually in our office in the mid 2013, 2015, as being a case that was being looked at by our cold case unit, our general cold case unit in the DA's office. So I became aware of the case, and I thought, you know what, this might be a good one to see about that genetic genealogy, that advanced DNA testing. So so again, I went through the process of getting approval to be able to receive funding to do this. So in early 2019, I submitted the DNA, the original sexual assault kits that were being held at the GBI. we submitted those to this private lab in Florida called DNA Labs International. And what we asked them to do is, of these 3 sexual assault kits that I provided to them, I asked them to create a DNA profile from that. Now you'll say, didn't we already have a DNA profile? We did, that was at the GBI. But we needed to create a new profile because we were going to be submitting it to another private lab. And at this point in time, the GBI, because of their rules and the different procedures that they have, we couldn't take that profile that was created, that was sitting at the GBI at the state lab, to submit that to a private agency, a private lab. So what we had to do is take what was left of that sexual assault kit back into our custody from the GBI, and then we submitted that to a private lab, DNA Labs International. They then created this profile, and with that profile, then we submitted that to the lab Parabon Nanolabs. Parabon is the agency that I was telling you before. You may have heard about if you watch things about the Golden State Killer, or anytime you kind of hear these new cases about things being solved through genetic genealogy. Parabon Nanolabs was the first to be doing this. There's some other labs that are starting to do this now, but it's still Parabon is kind of the main one. So what Parabon was able to do when we sent them this DNA profile is they're able to do 2 things for us. First thing is they're able to create a phenotype profile. And you'll ask, what is that? Well, what the phenotype profile does for us is basically it creates a picture. So it's able to tell us from this DNA profile, what is the person's ancestral history. So for instance, is the person from Germany? Do they have Hispanic ancestry? So essentially, what's the person's ancestry? What would it look like? Do we think they would have blue eyes and blonde hair? Do we think that they would have brown eyes? Do we think, what it basically comes up with a picture for us of what they think this person could look like. When could that be really helpful? Well, that could be really helpful if you have victims, or you have sketches or things of that nature, or you maybe had some sort of suspect and they don't match that profile at all. So that's kind of what an investigative tool that can help us with, where it essentially gives you a picture. The other thing that it does that we know more about is going to be, or that we hear more about, is this genetic genealogy. That basically what it does is it backtracks and it finds ancestors or relatives using a public DNA database. What's key about that I just said? It's using a public DNA database. So in this case, it used a database that's called GEDmatch, which is a public database that back when we conducted this working, that database was still open to the public. So what it is essentially, we're not talking about Ancestry.com or 23andMe or any of those where you all may have uploaded your DNA profile into that. Those are considered these private databases. And so law enforcement, the way that we do this genetic genealogy, we are not able to search through those databases necessarily. This is through a public DNA database. So people know when they are submitting their DNA into that system that it is for public use, which could be used through law enforcement. GEDmatch has now since changed the way they handle things, and now you actually have to opt into that as an individual when you're uploading your DNA profile into the public database. So now it's a little bit more closed than it used to be. But when we were running this profile, it was a public database. So doing that, Parabon was able to narrow down some relatives. It gave us essentially about 8 people that it thought it could be. And from that, we then did investigation and narrowed things down to a person, Lorenzo Williams. And how did we narrow that down? Well, it narrowed down, we looked at the potential people and leads that Parabon gave us, and then we looked at who was in and around the Atlanta area at the time of our offenses, who kind of met the profile that our victims described as far as age, race, height, things of that nature. And we then took that one hit, the Lorenzo Williams individual. We ran his criminal history, and we found that he had charges including peeping Tom, indecent exposure, burglary, all within the same area around that same time. So we thought, this guy maybe looks good for being our suspect. We found out that he was currently living in Arizona. So what we did then is we went out to Arizona. And we went out to Arizona with a search warrant to be able to collect his DNA to see if then he would match to our suspect. So we had investigators, we sent 2 investigators from the DA's office, the Saki investigator, Christy Nervin, who works exclusively with me on these cases. And then we also sent one of our other investigators, Nick O'Connor, who was working he was working major crimes and cold cases at the time. He is no longer with our office, unfortunately, but the 2 of them went out to Arkansas. They collected the DNA from the suspect, Williams. And the plan was then they were going to return to Georgia, and we would submit those swabs to the GBI. And then what we would do is compare those to the profile of those sexual assault kits that we still had in evidence. Remember, I told you we still had that DNA profile that was put together by the GBI back in 1999 and 2000. So what we were planning to do is compare those swabs that we took from Lorenzo Williams directly to that profile that we had from 1999 or 2000 time period. As a caveat, because nothing goes as we plan, when our investigators were at the airport on their way flying back here to Georgia, we received a phone call from the Arkansas investigators that we were working with because they were helping us to find him, that his wife had reported him missing. So at that point in time, we thought, okay, this sounds like maybe he is our guy, and he got spooked, and we were afraid that maybe he had fled. Because again, when we went out there, we didn't have enough to have an arrest warrant for him. We only had enough to be able to have a search warrant to collect his buccal swabs. We found out just about a day later that he had committed suicide, and so at that point in time, again, we felt like he probably looked pretty good to be the offender in these cases. And the GBI still, I asked them, even though we would be unable to prosecute the case because he was deceased, I asked the GBI if they would still conduct the testing to compare those swabs from Lorenzo Williams to our victims from 1999. They agreed to do that, and it did confirm that he in fact was the offender. So this 20 plus years later, we were able, using this genealogy, to be able to confirm his name had never come up in any sort of investigation at the time. There was nothing that would have led us to him to be committing these crimes. What we were then able to do is we were then able to reach out to these victims. In this case, there were 3 victims, as I mentioned before. We were able to sit down in person with 2 of those victims. The 3rd victim lives in North Carolina at the time, so we had to do that over the phone. But it was extremely rewarding to be able to go and meet with these victims and tell them that we had not forgotten about their cases, that we were still working them, and that we had figured out who did this to them. And while it's essentially, you know, there's really no such thing as closure in these kinds of cases. I mean, you hear people talk about closure a lot. There's really no such thing as that. But what I aim to do is give them that ability to close at least that chapter and be able to process that information however they're going to move forward with the rest of their lives. One of the victims said to me, and I've said this a lot when I talk about this case because it really stuck with me, is she said, you know, I watch all of these investigation discovery and forensic files and all these crime shows where they have all of these cold cases and, you know, they're solving with all this cool new technology. And she said, I always wondered when it would be my turn. And she said, and I didn't know that anybody was still looking. And now we were able to say, you know what, it's your turn. We solved your case. We've figured it out. We know who he is, and we can tell you what's happened with that. So that's one of the cool, really, you know, exciting new things that we've been doing. There's a couple of other cases that I have that I'd like to submit for this same sort of testing. And one of the other new things that we're working on here, I'll do a stop share now, but one of the other new things that we're able to work on is we've expanded our project from just cold case sexual assaults to now cold case sexually motivated homicides. So now we can also work on not just the cases where the kits weren't submitted initially, but we can work on all cold cases where there's a sexual component to it. And we actually now have a consultant who's a criminal profiler. So you see on some of these criminal minds or things like that, we now have a criminal profiler who will come in and also work on these cases with us. Some of you may have heard about the Samuel Little case. That's a case that he's a prolific serial killer. Some people are saying he is the most prolific in the entire country. And he has victims here in Georgia as well. And so we've been working with that profiler on that case. We don't have any in Cobb County right now, that we don't think we have any that link to him, but we have multiple out of the metro Atlanta area. And we've been able to work with the profiler to kind of figure out some of those cases. So again, I know we're coming up on time, on our time. I could talk for days about this. So I know I just kind of hit on some of the things that, you know, that we've been working on, but I would be happy to answer any sort of questions about it. And again, I am really excited to be able to talk about this. And I'm really excited that here in Cobb County, we do have the ability to work on this project. And again, our DA, my boss, Joyette Holmes, gives us that opportunity to be able to do these, you know, really great things we're kind of on the cusp of what is going on here in Georgia as far as with investigation and prosecution. I'll say back in October, I tried the first case to completion of one of the cases that was the Georgia Saki project. So it was a case that was from 1998. As I mentioned, the victim was 16 years old at the time. And so that was the first Saki case that was tried in the state of Georgia, was here in Cobb County. So again, that was a really exciting thing that we could do. And so I think it's really important that you all understand what your tax dollars are going to, that what we're able to do here in Cobb County, that we're working on these types of projects. So I'm happy to, again, stay with you all. I know some of you will probably have to get off right now. You'll have my contact information. So if you do have to leave, then please reach out to me. It's been great to see. I see some familiar faces on here. So again, thank you so much for having me here today. And again, Nick, whatever you want to do as far as Q&A, I'm happy to do that.
Yeah. As a matter of fact, if we have any burning questions, I know we're coming close on time, but if somebody's got a question, I don't want to deprive anyone of it.
I just want to say thank you. You know, it's really free to see Smyrna SVU here. I mean, you guys are working in the background, doing this incredible work for a population of people who, without your help, would never pursue remediation. So thank you. It's awesome.
Well, and thank you for saying that. Like I said, I've been a prosecutor since 2006, here in Cobb County since 2013, and talking to these victims and being able to work on these things and let them know that people are still working on their cases, all these closed cases, has been just so rewarding. And while we may not be able to actually prosecute all those cases, and I'm a prosecutor, so that's what I want to do with the cases, but it's been really, really rewarding to be able just to even do this part, to give some, as I mentioned, some sort of closure of that chapter for some of these victims, and to let them know we're still working on them. So there's a lot of those other cases out there that they're still sitting out there, cold cases, and we are working on them. So thank you for.
So go ahead and burst our bubble. It does not take 55 minutes to solve a case, right?
No, it takes a lot longer than that, unfortunately.
That's awesome. Did anyone else have a question? All right. Well, thank you so much for that. That was just amazing information, and it's just great.
I do have just one question. Teresa, do you need any volunteer help? Like, do you need houses to put people in emergencies, or is any of that possible?
So we're really lucky here because we do have Live Safe resources, and so we partner with them for a lot of our victim resources. So we really do kind of utilize the services from Live Safe resources.
Perfect. Thank you. I'm done.
That is awesome. Well, thank you very much. Once again, like I said, this is just great information. And then as part of the Smyrna Business Association, for our speakers, we like to give back to the charities of choice of our speakers. And Teresa, you did mention Live Safe as an organization. And on behalf of Live Safe, we're going to be donating $100 towards them from the Smyrna Business Association. And if there's anyone here today that's interested in after hearing all of this and trying to figure out ways to help, that's definitely an organization that can use our resources and the backing of the business community.
Thank you so much, Nick. Yeah, I really appreciate that. And I can't say enough about what Live Safe Resources does for us and with our partnership. And as we all know, in these trying times, Live Safe Resources, it's not just sexual assault victims, it's domestic violence victims. And we all know that right now with this pandemic that's going on, everybody's in need of additional resources. And so I really appreciate that, Nick, and Smyrna Business Association for doing that. So thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you. And so now, just before we end the program, we're going to quickly do one more trivia question from Paul, and for an Amazon gift card to one of our participants here in the call.
All right, so this is not a hard one. So if you're a Braves fan, you're going to have to be quick on the typing there in your chat box. So just type this in when you know it. But who's leading the team right now in stolen bases as of Friday last week?
Is anybody watching
On this one? Nope, not Swanson.
Does it include today? I think the game is on right now, right?
Yeah.
I'm not watching it, but
Actually, it's another
I would
pitching
have it on
battle.
in the background if I wasn't
0-0,
talking.
So, Acuna, did we just get Acuna in? Yeah, there you go. Kay Williams. There you go. So, all right. Kay and Ian, let me know where to send the cards to, and I'll get them out in the mail.
Oh, Kay, you're on mute. I feel like Kay was trying to say something.
No, I was just going to say thank you.
Oh, you're welcome.
Absolutely. All right. Well, everyone.
She has the best background of anybody. So.
She does.
It's even moving too.
Well, that's awesome. Well, everyone, thank you so much for coming. And if you have any questions about anything, please feel free to let us know. And Teresa, thank you so much for your time today. At this time, the meeting is adjourned.
Thank you, everyone.